How's it going, everybody? This is Mr. Gross again. Today we are going to get into personification, a little bit of anthropomorphism and how those two are different, and what using them can really do for your writing. If you don't have a piece of paper to take notes with, go ahead and push pause now and grab something because you're going to need some definitions. The first definition I want you to have is personification. And personification is giving human qualities or traits to animals and objects. And this is a little bit different than anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism really is giving these human qualities or traits to non-human entities. And the big deal there is entities, in order to make them appear like they're human beings. So when we talk about entities, at least in the sense of anthropomorphism, we're talking about things or beings that have self-awareness. So if we break this word apart, looking at the Greek and Latin roots, you see anthro is human, p or po relating to, morph is change, and we know this from all sorts of words with that morph root word in them. And then ism, the practice of. So very literally, anthropomorphism means the practice of relating human qualities to change something else. So even though personification and anthropomorphism sound very similar, we use them for different things. Personification is used to create imagery in our writing. So we see things like the slices of bread jumped out of the toaster, suddenly scaring me. We're relating that human action of jumping to the toast, but we're not really making the toast human. That's an anthropomorphic type of thing. Or we see the example, the wind whistled throughout the day. Again, we're giving that action of whistling to the wind. That's a human quality, a human action, but we're not actually making the wind self-aware. So it's used to create imagery. Anthropomorphism takes it one step further and really aims to make an animal, an object, a god, a deity, behave and appear like they are human beings. So we see this a lot in cartoons. We see this a lot in mythology, where we're seeing this very realistic human expression and human traits. Here's another little cartoon with Google. So they're used a little bit different. Anthropomorphism really taking it a step further to make something human rather than just giving something human traits or qualities. Now I have some riddles for you. Some of these are from some pretty famous poets. I'm going to go ahead and read the poem, and then what I want you to do is I want you to try to figure out what is this object, what is this riddle the poet's talking about, and then second, where do you see the personification? This first poem is by Sylvia Plath. I am silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. Whatever I see, I swallow immediately, just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. I am not cruel, only truthful. Hit pause, see if you can figure out what Plath is trying to personify and where exactly in this poem the personification is happening. Hit pause now. If you said Plath is talking about a mirror, you're absolutely correct. Now, the hard part here, where is the personification taking place in the poem? Anytime you hear an object talking, I am, we have personification because a mirror can't talk. So I am is personification. Silver and exact, those are more qualities of the mirror, not really a personification there. So I would go back down to that second line. I have no preconceptions. Now, this whole line would be considered personification because, again, we have I, the mirror's talking, and having preconceptions is a very human emotion or thought process. Line 3, I see, whatever I see. So seeing, I know lots of things see, but since we already know the mirror is being personified, we're going to consider seeing and swallowing immediately as personal actions. Line 4, just as it is doesn't really qualify as what the mirror is doing, but unmisted by love or dislike, these are human qualities, these are human emotions that the mirror is taking on. And then we have the whole last line. The mirror is not cruel, the mirror is only truthful, very human things. This one might throw you off a little bit, so listen really carefully. Here's a poem by Emily Dickinson. I am, in truth, a yellow fork from tables in the sky, by inadvertent fingers dropped the awful cutlery. Of mansions never quite disclosed and never quite concealed, the apparatus of the dark to ignorance revealed. Figure out what you think Emily Dickinson is talking about here, and then go through this poem and see if you can pick out where the personification is happening. Go ahead and hit pause now. If you came up with lightning, you are 100% correct. And where the personification is taking place, this is where this one gets tricky. Going through this, what I see as being personification in here is only those first two words in the poem. And you might say, yeah, but we have fingers dropped and mansions never being disclosed. But here Dickinson is talking about something other than lightning. Now, you could argue that this is personification for something, some deity up in the sky, but then we'd move from personification to anthropomorphism. Let's try the next one. This one can be a little tricky too. Here's a riddle by Sir Edmund Gosse. My love, when I gaze on thy beautiful face, careering along yet always in place, the thought has often come into my mind, if I shall ever see thy glorious behind. What do you think Sir Edmund Gosse is talking about here, and where do you see the personification? Hit pause now. If you said the moon, you got it. Now this one can throw you off where personification is taking place, mostly because we have this narrator talking rather than the object talking. So if you said my love, that's actually the narrator speaking rather than the moon speaking. So in line 1 here, I would say thy beautiful face would be the first place of personification. Again, I know that lots of things have good-looking faces. Animals have good-looking faces. Clocks have good-looking faces. But in the example of the clock, that's another example of us personifying an object. So thy beautiful face, the face would be of the moon. That would be personification of the moon. When we get to the second line, I would say careering along yet always in place could be personification. I think we do have that little leeway that we give poetry and poets. I think if you argued no, I'd accept that. If you had good reasoning, I think if you tried to argue yes, and here's why, I could also accept that. So we do have that leeway with poetry. This one can be a little tricky. Let's see if you can get it. If you break me, I do not stop working. If you touch me, I may be snared. If you lose me, nothing will matter. What is the object being personified, and where in this poem do you see personification? Hit pause now. If you said the author is speaking as a heart, you're absolutely correct. The tricky part here is where is the personification taking place? The first instance I see, I think would be me, because that's the heart speaking. If you said, no, I would say it's the whole first line because we see the heart talking and the heart's talking about itself, I'd accept that argument. Line 2, I. Anytime we have an object saying I, it's automatically personification. Do not stop working. This is another one that you could argue and say, no, lots of things work, and this is how people talk about things doing what they're supposed to be doing. I would say, okay. But if you said, no, I really see work as being this fundamental human action, I would say that's accurate as well. If you touch me. So again, the heart is saying me. That's where I see the personification. I may be snared. If you lose me, nothing will matter. And I didn't say that last line was personification at all, because it's not the heart that nothing will matter to, it's the person that the heart belongs to. Now, this last one isn't a riddle so much, but I did want to include it in this. This is a Joyce Kilmer poem titled Trees. And I include this, number one, because I think it's a really good poem. Number two, because we see personification all over this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. I want you to try and pick out where you see personification taking place. This is Trees. I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the earth's sweet-flowing breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray, a tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately lives with rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. So again, not a riddle, but we see personification all over the place. Now, the first instance I see of personification doesn't take place in that first couplet, that first stanza of 2 lines at all, because we have the narrator talking. So if you said, I think I shall, that was a good try, but again, that's not the tree talking, that's the narrator talking. So I see the first instance of personification being the hungry mouth, because trees don't have hungry mouths. So next in that stanza, sweet flowing breast. This is a human quality. Let's move to stanza 3. A tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray. Looking at something we believe as God is a very human thing, and lifting arms to pray. Humans pray, humans have arms. A tree that may in summer wear. I think we can dress animals up, but I wouldn't say animals are intentionally wearing anything, so wear would be a very human quality. A nest of robins in her hair. And here you could say, no, lots of things have hair, lots of animals have fur, but I would argue we already know we're personifying a tree, so you could add this, and I think most people would buy it. Upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately lives with rain. And I say intimately lives because intimacy is a very human quality. Now, the last stanza can throw some people off. Poems are made by fools like me. Again, here we have the narrator talking, but only God can make a tree. And I underline this in green because here we see anthropomorphism. God is a deity. God is something we think of being self-aware. So when we say God making a tree, yeah, that is an option, an instance of anthropomorphism, but it's not an instance of the tree being personified. So a little practice work with personification. Now these I'm going to have you do a little bit different. So I'm actually going to ask you to do 3 things. Number 1, I want you to pick out the object being personified. Number 2, pick out where you see the personification taking place. And number 3, what does that personification really mean? So let's do this first one together. The wind sang her mournful song through the falling leaves. Object being personified. The wind is the object. Personification, sang her mournful song. Mournful is a very human emotion, and singing is a very human thing to do, so that's the personification. Now, what exactly does that mean? What's happening here? I would say the wind sang her mournful song through the falling leaves, so What this sentence really means is the wind is blowing. It's this very low whistle as it makes its way through the leaves. See if you can do the rest of these.